Today for Tricky Thursday, I'm going to show you how to sew the catch stitch, or it's also known as the herringbone stitch, or I always thought of it as the cross stitch. Welcome back to my channel. It's still new, so I'm very excited. My name is Trisha. I'm the owner of Creative Costume Academy. We like to have fun learning pattern making here and sewing and fitting. So thank you for being here. Today is Tricky Thursday, and this will be a regular post. Every Thursday, I will share a tip or trick with you. Today, we're going to be talking about the catch stitch, otherwise known as the herringbone stitch, or I always thought of it as the cross stitch. So this is what it looks like again, so you can see what that is. It is one of probably the most used hand stitches, at least in my world. And my background comes from costuming. I've made costumes professionally for over 20 years for big theatrical productions, and I use this stitch a lot. And it's great for so many reasons. I want to just talk about a couple of those reasons before we get into how to do it. So a lot of times you see this stitch used on the hem of a garment. It works great for a hem, and the reason for that is it's a blind hem, so you don't see it from the right side of the garment, and I'll show you how fancy that is. It also works great because it creates a zigzag sort of line with doing the stitch. It allows for movement, so it's not just hammered in place like it would be if you did a running stitch or if you machine stitched something. So it allows for a little bit of movement, and because of that, you can also use this stitch for hemming knits. And I'll get into that when I get into the sewing part of it. So that's the great uses it has for using it for a hem. But the other wonderful thing is you can use it. I use it a lot in costuming because we always have a lot of extra seam allowance pressed to the inside so that we can make adjustments. And I have many videos where we'll go into that. That's a story for another day. But to hold it, if you have like an inch or an inch and a half seam allowance on the inside of your garment, you don't want that seam allowance flopping around on the inside of your garment. So a lot of times we'll use this stitch to hold the seam allowance down. So it's kind of like a hem, but it's holding your seam allowance down, and it keeps everything really nice and clean on the inside. But it's also used for other things. If say you have floating shoulder pads and you want to stitch those in, I mean, anywhere that you want to have a stitch where it's not completely anchored down like it would be if it was machine sewn, and wherever you don't want to see those stitches on the right side of your garment. So that's why it's an amazing stitch. It's used also a lot in tailoring. So it's just a really great handy stitch to know. And if you're getting into sewing, and if you are okay, I know not everybody likes hand sewing, but let me tell you, sometimes you just need it. Use your hand sewing to catch up on your TV time. That's what I love about it, is that you can step away from the machine and maybe even be social. Hand sewing is what it is, and sometimes you just need it, and sometimes this stitch is the best one to use. So let's go over to the table. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it and why I love it so much. When you're setting up, if you are a left-handed sewer, you're going to be going from right to left, and if you're a right-handed sewer, you're going to be going left to right. But I kind of like to think of it when you're doing the other stitches that I've shared with you on other Tricky Thursdays, like the running stitch or even the back stitch, you're going forward away from your body. When you're doing the catch stitch or the cross stitch like I'm showing you today, you're coming towards your body. So if I turned this and my body is over here, then I'm coming towards myself. It's kind of a backwards stitch. So whatever hand you sew with, that's how I would suggest thinking about it. So you're going to start with your knot in the hem side. So this would be the outside of your garment, and this would be the hem side of your garment. Then you want to go to the outer fabric of your garment and catch just a tiny little bit. The less you catch right here, the less you're gonna see on the outside of your garment. And then you're coming towards yourself. So you're coming back towards yourself instead of going forward. And I'm gonna catch a little bit. You can catch a little bit more on the hem side because it's not going to be seen, and you definitely don't wanna catch the fabric underneath that is gonna be on the outside. And you pull that through and you just repeat the process for the whole length of the hem. So I'm gonna grab a little tiny bit, as little as you can, and then cross over here. So this is why I like to call it a cross stitch, because we're creating little X's, if you will. Notice these little X's that we see here. But it's really great. I'm gonna show you once I get a couple more stitches here. And notice every time I'm grabbing this hem, I'm not catching the garment fabric underneath, the outer fabric underneath. Now, the reason that they say this kind of a stitch works really well for knits is because of the zigzag of going back and forth, catching little bits. It allows this to stretch. So this type of hem finishing, if you're using it for a hem, does allow for some movement. It's not hammered in like it would be if it was machine sewn. The other great thing about this is that it's like a blind hem. It's invisible from the right side, and the less you catch on that garment fabric, the less you're gonna see on the other side. The tighter or closer your zigzag stitches are to each other, the more stretch allowance you're gonna have, because what happens is with this zigzag, and this is the same for doing a zigzag machine stitch, when you pull it, the more that this thread has the wiggle room to go straight, that's what allows the stretch. Notice how it's straightening out as I'm stretching it, and then when it goes back. Now, of course, this isn't a stitch that is only used for stretch, but I wanted to show you that advantage as well. I'm gonna keep going a little bit more, coming a little closer with my stitches, so that I have a tighter zigzag, but not narrower this way, because I still wanna keep that wiggle room, and we'll see the difference. Notice this whole time I'm coming towards myself and not away. And when I'm doing this stitch into the outer fabric, I'm catching right above where my hem stops. And when I go in to catch the hem side of my hem, I can go in about 1/4 of an inch is what I'm doing. But you know, it depends on what you're comfortable with and what you're stitching, and just as long as you try to keep it uniform. I'm going a little ununiform because I wanted to show you the difference. Now I've got these just a little bit closer together, and these are further apart. So notice I kind of am straightening out a little soon there, but still this is quite stretchy fabric and I have quite a bit of wiggle room. And then notice with the smaller, I have a little bit more before it starts to straighten out. So that's kind of the difference in setting the dimensions or how far apart you want your stitches. But there you go. That's your catch stitch or your cross stitch or herringbone stitch, whatever you like to call it. Here's a sneak peek at what the right side of the fabric looks like. As you can see, you can't even see those stitches. And I used white thread on dark green fabric. So it is a testament to how thick that spandex is. So the thicker the fabric, the easier it is to hide your stitches. But pretty cool, huh? So now you know how to do your own catch stitch. I hope you liked this Tricky Thursday, learning how to do this very important hand stitch. Hope you will join us for more in the future. Be sure to save this post so that the next time you find a need for this handy stitch, you know exactly how to do it. And please subscribe and turn on those notifications so you know when we post our next video, which will be next week. If you'd like to know more about pattern making, I have my free pattern masterclass down below where you can check it out for free, no strings attached. And if you are ready to start learning and diving into pattern making, check us out at PMA, Pattern Making Academy. You can find us at learnpatternmaking.com, and we'll dive right in and do lots of fun styles. Thank you so much for watching. Happy pattern making.